Welcome to Faithful Doubt. My name is Jordan. This is our second episode in our current series where we're going through the 5 W's, the 5 questions that in my life I have most often received from both Christians and non-Christians about concerning our doubts about God and faith and the Bible and Christianity. And so last week we talked about what is the Bible all about, what is Genesis specifically all about. And through our conversation about Genesis, I said, instead of asking what is Genesis all about, what is the Bible all about, we should be asking who is it all about. And that, I think, ultimately leads to God. And so today I want to talk about who is God. Can we know God? Who is He? And so I want to start by saying, let's remove Scripture for a little bit here, because if you're non-Christian, if you're an anti-Christian, if you're a believer of a different faith, obviously you don't subscribe to the authority of Scripture, and you don't see it as truth, and so that causes issues right off the bat. So, do we need the Bible to know there's a God? I don't think so, and that's what I'm going to kind of talk about here for a moment. So whenever you remove Scripture from this conversation, who is God? I think you naturally go towards the realm of science and scientific questions. And science obviously explains how things work, not necessarily why we're here or who God is. But can science disprove God or prove God? I don't think so. But can it lead to one of those two conclusions? I do think it can. And a natural scientific question to ask is, well, how was everything created? We know that something can't come out of nothing. So how was everything created? And a lot of Christians get into the argument of creationism versus evolution. And I'm not going to do that today, but I tell my students all the time, I personally, whenever we're talking about science, I personally find the Big Bang Theory to be provide a lot of evidence towards the existence of a God. It doesn't even have to be the Christian God. I find that theory in science actually leads to the existence of God. And as I'm simplifying the science, I'm not a physicist, but we know that in that theory, we say that we don't know what happened for the first couple of seconds before the Big Bang, and we don't know what caused the Big Bang, and we don't know where all the material and all the atoms and particles and everything within the universe, we don't know where it all came from. So that right there tells me there is something. If the Big Bang explains if the Big Bang explains the natural elements and the material elements of our universe, there must be something supernatural that caused the natural, because science will always say that there's a reason, there's a how for anything natural, anything material, but it can never prove the supernatural, because that's not what it's there for. Science is there literally to prove the natural. So, prove the natural and question the process by which things happen. So, the supernatural, in my opinion, had to cause the natural. Something can't come out of nothing. And if there is a God, he or she would not be bound by the very laws that exist within our universe. So time, gravity, the laws of thermodynamics, and also there would be no beginning and end to that thing. It would be infinite. He or she would be infinite. So to me, I don't know how you explain how everything came into existence without the supernatural. I don't know how you get around that, and I welcome feedback and pushback on that. But more specifically, I don't know how, when you look at the fine-tunement of the universe and the galaxy, like the Earth is just the exact amount of distance away from the sun for carbon atoms and life on Earth to exist. Gravity is just the right. Gravity is just right enough that we can have life. When the Big Bang happened, I think gravity was just right enough that the particles were able to form stars and galaxies and planets. And if it had been any stronger, everything would have been clumped together. And if it was any weaker, it would never have created planets and stars. If I'm wrong on that, someone correct me. But I believe that's the theory of fine-tunement as well. Like, when we look at the universe, things are so fine-tuned. It leads me to the analogy of any object, really. You look at airplanes, and I use airplanes because I went to college to be a pilot. I never finished that, but I did learn how to fly. I learned how a plane works, and I've always been fascinated by airplanes, specifically World War II era aircraft and how they work. And my point, the analogy I'm using here is I didn't have to know how lift, the angle of attack and of the wings and the flaps and the fuel and the engine and how all that worked and the controls. I didn't need to know how all those things worked together for the plane to take off. I knew that the plane could fly before I knew how all that worked. I've flown in planes. I've seen planes fly. I know that the plane works. I don't have to know how it works to know it works. I also don't have to know how it works to know that someone created the airplane, right? I know that plane didn't just randomly happen. I don't think if you were to give 20 billion years that the plane would just randomly come together. I mean, time and randomness can't, I don't think, explain how the plane came into existence. So using that same analogy, do I have to know exactly how God created everything to know, first of all, that it was created, but secondly, to know who he is? And that's when you look. That's why I think when you look at creation, and it says in Romans that God is self-evident to everyone. No one is without excuse, because through creation, God is self-evident to us all. When we look out in creation and we examine it and we study it, I think the natural conclusion is that something or someone created everything. So, which leads me to the next point. Can we know who that person is? And this is probably where a lot of people have their issue. It might not be the existence of God. I think a lot of people believe that there is something, that there's something greater than ourselves. But I think where people get stuck is, can you actually know who God is? If we're finite beings, can we know an infinite being? And from my own life, I'll just explain how I think we can't, how I've come to know God. And that is through reason and rationale, but also through experience. So it's not just here that I know God. It's also here. And so as I've reasoned and used rationale through scripture and science and other sources to know God, I have those arguments in my head for why I can reason that God exists, right? And those can be dismantled, they can be weakened. People who are much wiser and much smarter than me, can dismantle those arguments. But what can't be dismantled so easily is the experience that I have in my relationship with God. So there's more than just the head. There's more than just knowledge and knowing God. I've experienced God through more than the rational and the material. But that's where I think people have an issue, because then does that become subjective to everyone's experience? Is there more than one God? Can everyone kind of make up their own God? And I think that's why once we removed scripture earlier, I think you have to bring it back. There has to be an objective source of truth and a way to know God. And I think that's exactly why we have the Bible. This is the way we can have a relationship. We can start a relationship with God, and we can know who he is. But here's the problem with scripture, right? We have to be as objective as possible, but if what Jesus did on the cross, if God really came down to earth in the form of Jesus and gave his only son to us, and Jesus lived this perfect life without sin. And then he was betrayed, placed on a cross, murdered, and all of our sin and all of our judgment is placed on him in that moment. And he experiences the cosmic judgment of all of our sin, past, present, and future. And he takes that all upon himself. And he doesn't just wipe away our sin. He actually credits us with his life, with his good deeds. And so when he dies and he's in a tomb for 3 days, and then he rises again, he defeats death. And now on Judgment Day, when God sees you, God doesn't see Jordan. He sees Jesus. He sees Jesus' life and death. And he sees how Jesus took my sin and everyone else's. If that is really true, and now we can know God through Jesus. He is the way we can know God. If that's true, then that changes everything, right? I mean, that transforms your life. That changes your life. That shakes the very existence of my own life. So if that's true, it's really hard to be objective about Scripture, right? Because it's so important. That's everything. So let's put it this way. You have a judge overseeing a case where he is financially invested into a company that, has committed a crime or whatever. And the judge will gain financially, will benefit financially from however the case turns out. Well, the judge, if it was a good judge, would recuse himself from that case. So as Christians, here's the problem. We can't recuse ourselves from Scripture because it is so important. It is so life-changing. So we have to be as objective as possible, but we also have to recognize that we can't be totally objective when reading Scripture. And therefore, that's what kind of causes issues with non-believers. You just can't be totally objective about this. And so that is our attempt to know God. Our theology is we're finite beings trying to grasp the infinite and understand who he is. And I think once you start wrestling with who is God, what created everything, what is it all about, I think that leads you to the next question, which is, why are we here? What is our purpose? Why do we exist? And if there is no God, if Jesus didn't come to save us and die on the cross and defeat death, then why does anything matter, right? Why, if all that matters is material, then why does anything that I believe really matter? Why does anything you believe really matter? We have no purpose. We're just here to die and become worm food, and then after so many trillions of years, nothing will exist and nothing will have ever mattered in this life. And throughout the existence of the universe. Once it dies out, nothing will have ever mattered. So then what is the point? But if God does exist, and we can know him, then everything matters. So that leads us to the next question, why? Why did God create us? Why are we here? Why do we exist? And so I hope I've gotten the conversation started on this question, who is God? Can we know God? And if you have questions, please comment below. If you're unsure of something I've said or you would like further clarification on something I've said, please let me know. I'll do my best to clarify those things for you. If you're new to Faithful Doubt, please click join on our group page and you'll just have to answer some questions. But we're so glad to have you join us, and welcome to this community where we're wrestling with our faith, we're wrestling with our doubts and our faith, and how those go together. Now, I'll say this to end the video. I think it's just as important to be skeptical about our faith as it is to be, I think it's just as important to be skeptics of our doubts as it is skeptics of our faith. We must doubt our doubts as well as doubt our beliefs, because that's intellectually being honest, right? If we have doubts, then we need to actually doubt our doubts to see where we're wrong or where we're right. So I hope going forward we kind of have that mindset throughout these videos, throughout any discussion we have on the page. Okay, my name is Jordan. Again, please comment below with your questions, and remember, who is it all about? Not what is Scripture all about. It's all about Jesus. And can we know Jesus? I think we can. I think Scripture provides a way for us to know him, but I think there are other ways that we can know who God is and if he exists. I'll see you next time.